plans driving our mission towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. One thing that he enjoys most working in staffing is that every day he gets to speak to someone that he's never met before. Tisheena Harris is currently the Finance and Administrative Manager for the Department of Mathematics and Applied Math program. Last September, she celebrated her 26th work anniversary. Her career at Yale began in 1995 as a casual employee and then worked as a CNT for 19 years, transitioning from a facilities custodian to a research assistant in the Keck Biotechnology Resource Laboratory. Once she completed her master's degree in business administration, she was hired as a financial assistant and then eventually as a fiscal team lead. In 2014, Tisheena then ultimately transitioned over into a managerial role as operations manager for the School of Engineering and Applied Science. Welcome both. And then we have John Mays. He earned a bachelor's degree in computer science from the University of Connecticut and an MBA from the University of New Haven. And since '98 has held a variety of leadership positions here at Yale. John has held roles of increasing responsibility, including Deputy Director of Internal Audit, Director of Procurement Systems Electronic Commerce, Yale's Workday Implementation Change Management Workstream Leader, and AVP for Change Leadership and Communications. So a lot going on. In 2005, John became Yale's first Chief Procurement Officer and served in that role until 2017, when he accepted his current role as Associate Vice President of Administration. John is passionate about diversity, inclusion, and belonging work, sustainability initiatives, and fundraising for the United Way of Greater New Haven. Welcome, John. And lastly, but not least, of course, we have Meredith Mira. She joined Yale's Office of Career Strategy in the summer of 2013, where she advises students and alumni as they begin the process of articulating who they are, what they care about, their skills, and how they want to make an impact in their communities. She has significant experience from first generation and otherwise underrepresented backgrounds. She has significant experience shaping postgraduate career paths for a wide range of students, including those from first generation and otherwise underrepresented backgrounds, helping them center their lived experiences within the broader world of work. Meredith completed her doctoral degree at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where her research focused on how high school students from a range of racial and socioeconomic backgrounds became aware of social inequality and motivated to work towards social change. Welcome, Meredith, as well. We thank you all for joining us. And now that we learned more about our panelists, let's get to some action. Meredith, could you introduce us to the topic?
Yes, thank you so much, Rita, and welcome everyone. I am going to just kick us off here with a brief hands-on activity as we start to think about transferable skills and what they are and how you identify them. So I'm actually just going to jump right in, and I see there are 87 participants in here, and I am very much hopeful that many of you sitting here will get involved in this kind of, it's not an icebreaker, but the icebreaker activity. So I'm going to jump in with what I want you to do first, and then I'll highlight why I wanted you to do this afterwards. So I'd like for each of you on this call to reflect back on the last 2 weeks at your job here at Yale. I want you to think about projects that you've been a part of, processes that you've been a part of, people that you've had more interaction with over these last 2 weeks. So take a minute, not even a minute, take 20 seconds and think about things you've been involved in over the last 2 weeks. Okay, you might have something in your mind. Okay, within those projects, those tasks that you've been doing, those processes, the people you've been communicating with primarily over the last 2 weeks, I want you to identify one way that you have helped someone or helped a project. What were you doing? So think about one way you helped a person or a project over the last 2 weeks, and think about what were you doing? And one of the things that has just been shared here are some of the kinds of skill sets you might want to be thinking about. When you were doing this helpful thing, were you actively listening, as in an interpersonal skill? Were you giving a presentation? Were you managing some time? Were you being inquisitive and empathetic with people? Were you showing up on time? Were you doing something to help solve a problem? Okay, so think about the thing you were doing and what is it that you were actually doing in that moment that helped you move something forward in a positive way. So now that you have this thing that you've helped, I want you to think, what was the primary skill you were using in order to help that person or help that process? You have this list of skills here. It doesn't have to be these skills, but these are nice transferable skills that we could highlight. And I want you to type in the chat what the skill was, or at least type in a short phrase that highlights what you were doing to help someone or something. And I'm going to wait until we get some things in the chat, and then I'll kind of wrap up this piece. Good. Empathy and communication, active listening, problem solving, strategic thinking, analyzing data, accountability, attention to detail, writing clearly and concise. I love all of these. Data analysis, honesty, organized a visit, extreme attention to detail, accepting mistakes, actively listening. Good. Researching information. I see some really good pieces in here that are both some technical skills and some what we could call either essential skills or soft skills in terms of empathetically listening and engaging. So the reason that I wanted to kick us off here, number one, is to recognize the fact that you all already have skills, and to recognize that I want us to reframe our skills and to see them as the moment-to-moment, everyday things that we are doing in our jobs. And that often when we're writing our resumes, we tend to actually end up writing our job descriptions, just what it is that we're supposed to be doing in our jobs, rather than writing what it is that we helped, a skill that we use to put our imprint on our jobs. People don't necessarily need to know what your job description is. They want to know how you made an impact in your job. And that's the kind of thing that you just wrote here in the chat and what I think we're talking about today. So thank you for all jumping in with these really good skill sets.
Thank you for leading us in that activity, Meredith. Really appreciate it, and appreciate that framing of how you're making a difference and thinking about it as more than just the various topics and job descriptions, as you noted. With that in mind and the chat open, please feel free to continue to send those thoughts around. We'll go ahead and jump into the questions that we've got for our group of panelists. And the first question we have is going to go over to Nick. And Nick, to help ground us in this conversation, would you please share what are transferable skills, a little bit of a description about maybe what the difference is between a hard skill and a soft skill, and some of those references that Meredith just had up on that slide?
Thanks, Brittany. Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to share what my thoughts are on these topics. So as you could see from that slide that we just went over, I identify transferable skills as skills that you develop throughout your life. They are not job specific. So you could basically acquire these skills in many different jobs, such as, I saw prioritizing here, active listening, nonverbal communication. I saw a lot of these just come through the chat. These you could acquire through many, many different jobs, but these are abilities that mature over time, and that can be developed in one situation and transferred to another situation. In regards to the question on hard skills versus soft skills, I'll start with hard skills and what I believe those are. So now I refer to hard skills as being job-related knowledge and abilities that employees need to perform their jobs effectively. So some examples of hard skills would be possibly being bilingual or using or proficient in the Adobe software suite, being proficient in programming languages such as Java, Python, etc. Those are what I would call hard skills. Soft skills, on the other hand, again, back to the slide that we just reviewed, those the majority of those were soft skills, and those are personal qualities that help employees really thrive in a workplace. And again, some examples, integrity, teamwork, creativity, willingness to learn, and going through the chat, you'll see a lot of those soft skills.
Thank you, Nick.
Mm-hmm.
Meredith, bringing this back over to you, how can we reflect on our abilities and identify our transferable skills?
Yeah, thank you. So I think there are a couple of ways that we can reflect on this. There are a range of sort of skill matcher, even quizzes that are out there online. And I think that some of our organizers may be sharing some of these links at the end. But there are, in fact, I could even drop it in there at this moment. You don't need to open this up now and do it, but I'm putting here in the chat, there is this careeronestop.org toolkit that has some skill matcher things that you can kind of look at. There is mynextmove.org that kind of aligns with some things. So these are places where you could go and actually just, it asks you questions about the kinds of skills that you might, it's trying to see like what you like, the things you do, the things you're already good at, and it can help you if you aren't really getting a good picture of yourself. Just, we're kind of a fish swimming in our own water, so it's hard to always know what it is that we are good at and what we're skilled in. And so some of these kinds of little quiz, it's less of a quiz than it is, just yes, I have the skill, no, I don't. It can kind of illuminate for you what some of those skills are. So that's one place that you could look if you're just doing something on your own. I do think being able to do some of the activity that we did right at the beginning, every so often within your job, to actually stop and say, how did I help someone or something this week? Do it a month at a time. I think the problem is that we often are not thinking about what our skills are until we sit down to apply for another job. And then we're looking at our resume and it feels totally overwhelming. And we've forgotten everything that we do on a day-to-day basis. We don't actually think of ourselves as skilled people. We think of ourselves as a position description. And so we just end up writing that, and we have no concept of actually the skill we have and how we have influenced our jobs. And so I think one of the things that I would encourage people to do is to think of this as a consistent thing that you do in your life, that you take some steps back and think about, what have I done and how has someone been like, wow, Rita, that was so helpful. I'm even literally asking some of your colleagues and even sharing in return, what are the ways that you think I was helpful in this moment along the way, can be really illuminating in a way that is hard for us to see.
Thank you, Meredith. I certainly can appreciate and relate to searching for someone else to give some feedback. Perhaps we're being too modest or just not seeing our skills, and having an outside opinion, whether it's through a quiz or a colleague, is a fantastic suggestion. Thank you. With that, jumping over to John, who I want to also make sure we give credit for creating the slide and sharing that resource that we've been circulating out throughout. So thank you, John, for that resource. Question for you is, transferable skills can be used by professionals for promotions or career pivots. And from your experience, when should someone start to explore new opportunities and look to identify or grow those transferable skills?
Yeah, so thank you, Brittany. I kind of feel like I think about transferable skills as sort of on a continuum, right? And so throughout your career, there are things that you will pick up and learn and hone and get better at over time, right? I can think back to my early career, and I was working on things like just listening skills or communication skills, verbal and written communication skills. And I can't overstate how important it is to think about those on a continuum, right? Your ability to be a good listener gets better over time. And with experience. And as you work on your own skills, it's really a great thing to be able to reflect back on people who have been good at those things that you've seen. So that's one technique and one approach that I would encourage people to think about. I remember there's a gentleman who I worked for, a few jobs ago, a few years ago, and he made you feel like you were the only person in the room when you were talking with him. He listened to you actively, right? So he reflected back what you just said. He asked questions about what you were communicating. You sort of felt like, and he was a top level, executive in the organization. So he felt like you were the only person there. And that skill is something that you develop over time. Communication skills and listening skills, the ability to write concisely and clearly is something that takes, at least it took me, many, many years to continue to, and I still work on it, right? I'm still honing that skill. It's not something you're ever done with. So this is a lifelong exercise. It's something that you pursue from the very early days of your first job all the way through, my 27th career year here at Yale. You continue to pursue those things. I've gotten 360-degree feedback from colleagues and from friends where I could understand, similar to what Meredith was talking about, where was I helpful and where do I have an opportunity to learn and develop and grow? And I think those are gifts, right? Those are the most precious gifts you can get when you get feedback from someone else about how well you do things and maybe where you have an opportunity for improvement. So, I would just say for everybody who's thinking and watching this, you already do have many of the skills that we're going to show on the slide and that we're going to talk about. And it's an exercise in honing and getting better at it, right? So be honest with yourself, get feedback from other people, continue to work on it.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate that visual of the continuum. There's always room for improvement and for growth and for us to all keep learning and deepening our understanding. Tisheena, the next question we have is for you and would be curious to know what resources, what are the resources to help identify transferable skills that you found most helpful in your career, either within the university system or externally?
For me, I found resources within the university through the LinkedIn, which is an external resource, but it's also connected to the university. There's a course by the name of Switching Your Career, Identifying Your Transferable Skills. There's also Coursera. They have a course on managing emotions in times of uncertainty and stress. And so for me, I've been really interested in articles on emotional intelligence. And so I've been kind of delving into that a bit. There's the, emotional self-awareness, self-management, emotional self-control, remaining adaptable, and having empathy. I mean, especially in times of, what we faced recently, right, in recent times. And so just inspiring others to succeed. And so for me, that has been great for me, just finding the articles. There are LinkedIn articles, there are articles even on Forbes magazine. So there's so much you can find. I mean, Google, right? You just Google and select, and I'm all about self-development and self-analysis. And so with that, I try to find information at every turn.
Thank you for that. I've certainly benefited from those LinkedIn learning courses that you just mentioned. They're a fantastic resource. So thank you for making sure those got elevated.
And actually, I'm sorry, Yale also has a Center for Emotional Intelligence. So just putting that out there.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you. That one I did not know. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Karen now to ask our next round of questions.
Thank you, Brittany. These next few questions relate to resumes, and the first question is for John. John, how important is it to highlight transferable skills in a resume, and what skills are you looking for when reviewing a candidate's resume?
That's a really good question. There's a couple of important things that are sort of framing kind of things to think about. Resumes are a one-page sort of overview of what you want a prospective manager, hiring, employer to know about you. And as such, one of the things I find is people do tend to tell their version of what they want people to know, as opposed to what people need to hear and understand what they're looking for. And so making that distinction between what does the hiring manager need to know about me versus what do I want to tell them is the place that I would start. The other thing is, if you imagine that most jobs, there's many, many resumes that are going to pass before a hiring manager, it's important to be clear and concise. The writing skills, and you can get help with this if you feel like you need a little help with this, but the writing skills are really important. Most resumes, the best thing you can do is lead off with the action skill that you use to perform the outcome that you were trying to get to. Not the job, not the responsibility, but the skill that you used and the outcome that you got. So an example might be led a committee to develop XYZ presentation or outcome, or the results that you got. So you could say, worked really closely with a group of people to lead them through to get these XYZ results. So I think the key is you want to use an action verb in the beginning of all your resume statements that helps people understand what you did, how you did what you did, and then what you did, right? The outcome that you got. So the key for a resume is that it's really a collection of the most important things that you want the hiring manager to know that you've accomplished, and that they might feel like, wow, if I put this person on my team, I'm going to really benefit from some of the experience and some of the capabilities this person has. That's the key to thinking about the resume.
That's very helpful. Thank you, John. Thank you for being so specific as well. So Meredith, how can candidates best showcase their transferable skills on their resume?
Yeah, great. So I think John really just laid that out really nicely. I think that he put it really well in that you're opening with an action verb that really highlights the skill you're trying to reflect. So one of the things that I often have the students that I work with do is, they've written, and you usually are writing in bullet points. It doesn't actually have to be a bullet point. I mean, it can be a sentence and then another sentence, but you are not writing in narrative form. We should not see an I, a we, and us. Try to limit the amount of articles you use. So you're going to kind of remove thes and a's and ands. There's a certain kind of language and feel of resumes that after you've looked at it for a while, you're so used to it. But when I see students, oh, right, just take the out, take the an out. It just gives you a shortened version of your language, a little more concise. But when I see a student coming in and they will have 3 bullet points, I often have them take a step back and I say to them, first, I want to know, what is it that you want an employer to know about you based on this overall experience? What are the skills you want an employer to know that you have based on this experience? Because most of the time, what I do see are what the person's responsibilities were. I coordinated a conference. I met weekly with leadership team and took notes or something. It's a very, you could almost say, oh, give me your position description. And I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, oh, that's exactly what I'm reading here is your position description, rather than the skills that you have and the outcomes that you contributed to. So when we reframe each of these experience entries and think about, what am I trying to tell an employer about me based on this? Sometimes someone will say, well, I really was very good at taking an initiative. And I look at the bullets and there's nothing in the bullets that talk about initiative taking. Or I was really quite a leader, or I actually made people feel really comfortable. Like I was very good at engaging people and making them feel like they belonged. Those are the kinds of skills that are really important and are actually some of the top skills that employers are looking for. These abilities to engage, build relationships, empathetically connect. But we don't know how to write about these on a resume. I think it's like we think of the technical things and not the empathetic kinds of things. So I want for people to take a step back and think about what it is that you're trying to say about yourself, and not just what the job is that you did, and then move into exactly what John said. You're opening with an action verb that conveys that skill you're trying to convey, highlighting a little bit about what it is that you did, right? We do want to know a little of what your responsibilities were. And then we need to close with some sort of accomplishment, result. If you don't have a result, what your goal was, what you were working towards. And that's what enables you to more broadly relate to different areas of work. I'm going to put in the chat, there is within the Office of Career Strategy, we do have some helpful action verbs that are broken out, and they're similar and mapped onto, I think, the slide that John has shared earlier. But if you're looking for action verbs, you can find these online too, but you could look there.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much, Meredith, and thank you for elaborating on that. The next question is for Tisheena. Tisheena, how can one demonstrate the valuable soft skills such as integrity, responsibility, and reliability through transferable skills?
Thank you for the question, Karen. So I think first and foremost, just showing yourself to be trustworthy, right? And being respectful. Respect goes a long way. Being respectful of others, exercising patience, emotional control, that kind of lends itself back to the emotional intelligence, being respectful of others' time and contributions, a thank you goes a long way. If you're going to be late to a meeting, just to say simply, that I'm running late, just, please be aware, just being respectful and considerate of the other individuals' times, demonstrating the ability to remain calm and manage challenges and unexpected events. And then I often try to ask myself the question, if it were me that someone else was dependent upon, how would that look? How would that appear? Just placing yourself in the other person's shoes. And so I try to remain cognizant of that at every time and moment. Being and remaining honest, owning up to your mistakes if you're finding that there's something that you did wrong and it impacted someone else, and also just trying to work to self-correct. John, you mentioned also earlier, which is something I always try to do, and I was told this years ago, to remain present in the moment. There's, huge benefits, to remaining present in a moment. I mean, if you're in a meeting, answering emails or taking a call, that's not showing respect for another. Even I would say also consider how your actions, again, impact another, thinking beyond yourself, looking at the larger picture, communicating always your plans and intentions, being reminded that teamwork extends beyond the four walls of your department or unit. Teamwork kind of goes to your other colleagues outside of your general area. Even showing initiative, I think it's a good area of responsibility that it can be demonstrated. And developing a strong work ethic, ensuring the work is done well, completed on or before a deadline, and just having that person being able to rely on you and not question or having to follow up, or knowing that you would see through to the end on a project, because whatever you do would directly impact someone else, whether you realize it or not. Everyone is up against a deadline, they have a timeline to meet, and so kind of taking all those things into consideration, I think, goes a long way.
That's great advice. Thank you, Tisheena. And for our final question regarding resumes, Nick, could you please share with us what is a professional narrative and how should candidates incorporate their transferable skills in a professional narrative?
Right. So a professional narrative answers the question, who are you and what do you do? Any research that you do online will mostly just say, what do you do? But I added in the who are you as well, because we're talking a lot about soft skills today as well. And again, those are more personal. So answering that question in a very clear, straightforward, compelling way. You should always have a version of this narrative memorized, because it will come up in two different important places. We're talking about the resume piece right now. So the cover letter is my opinion as to where the narrative is shared. A cover letter is really overlooked, especially these last few years, but it's the best time to share your narrative. What do you do? What are your transferable skills? Talking and explaining them in that letter. What are you passionate about, etc. What are some of your experiences over the years in your current position, past position, life? So yes, transferable skills should absolutely be included in your professional narrative. It helps you describe your work and who you are as a person. The second place a narrative will be mentioned is most likely during a job interview. We've all been in that seat and asked, so tell me, what do you do? And again, it's basically the same thing as a cover letter. And I think that answering with 4 straight bullet points is not the best way to go, but it's more so going over what you included in your cover letter, talking about those transferable skills, those experiences, possibly mentioning projects. I saw somebody in the chat had mentioned, how could we talk about our transferable skills and explain them? I think in your narrative, that would be a good example. If you worked on a very complicated project or worked on a team to create or take on an objective, explaining that in the cover letter, but it would be a great place to do it. And I would call that the professional narrative in that case.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Nick.
Mm-hmm.
I will turn it back to Rita for some more great questions.
Thank you so much, Karen. So one thing when we were putting together all these questions for this great panel that came up was the imposter syndrome, with which most of you are familiar with. And that relates with feeling like you don't belong in a position or in a career, that you don't have the skills, you don't belong to the career that you're in or that you would like to apply for. And that can be a major roadblock to even consider driving our career. Hence, it's not uncommon to feel like we do not have those skills to apply for a new position. Meredith, what advice would you offer about this?
Yeah, definitely. So I think we've all had experiences of imposter syndrome and feeling like we don't belong, or I've just gotten this job and someone is going to find me out, or I don't think I can apply for this job because I don't have all of the skills that are listed. And I'd be really curious to hear from our other panelists too around this kind of, I don't have all of the skills that are listed on a position description. First of all, nobody is ever going to have all the skills that are listed on a position description. And one of the things that I want for you to be thinking about when you're looking at position descriptions is maybe to bucket up the main skills that you think they're looking for. What are the big, 3 or 4 things that you kind of keep seeing coming up in this? And do I have most of them? If so, great, then I should go for this. You don't need to have all of them. I mean, you certainly don't need to have all of them within one bucket. Okay, I have some of these things around some of the technical skills they want. You don't need to have all of them. So that's number one, and nobody does. Number 2, I would say one of the reasons that we can sometimes doubt ourselves and doubt our capabilities is that we actually haven't taken time to reflect on our own skill sets. And it goes back to what we did at the very beginning, is that we have not in fact taken any time to elucidate who we are, the things we bring, what we care about. It really takes some time, what Nicolas was just talking about in terms of your own personal narrative. And I put a link in the chat that we share with students here around how to answer this question. Tell me about yourself and why you're so interested in this role. And it often throws people off because they are not prepared to tell somebody about themselves. You start to think like, what am I supposed to be telling them about? Like, do they want to know my resume? Do they want to know the things I enjoy doing outside of work? Like, what are they actually asking me? And I think this is a strategic way for you to answer something that leads you to why you want to work for this organization. But what it actually requires is that you've reflected on yourself, the things you care about, the things you bring to the table. And most of us just don't take time to actually do this. So when you don't take time to actually reflect on your skills and who you are and what you care about, then I think we actually start to doubt ourselves because we actually just haven't done the work. And when you haven't done the work, you think you don't have these things. It's just that you actually haven't figured out what the things are. And so I think from my perspective, I think that we could get into a wide range of how there are inequitable ways that people have been prepared for jobs. There are inequitable questions about education and even what that maps onto in terms of where you're starting in the workplace. And I don't want to say that those things don't matter, but what imposter syndrome is actually about your own feelings of self-efficacy, your own feelings of your capabilities to do these things. And so I think self-reflection and being able to write these things and practice them, saying them, say it to a wall. I mean, you don't even need to talk to somebody, but actually going through and saying like, who am I and what do I care about and what do I do well? You need to be doing that along the way. And when you don't do that, what ends up happening is that you don't apply for certain jobs because you don't think you have the skills. So you take yourself out of the running. There are a number of students that I've talked to who've come back as alums who've said, like, I kind of just threw my hat in the ring for this job. And I really didn't have like 3/4 of the skills, but I had this one really interesting thing. And we ended up talking about that. And I actually ended up getting a slightly different role. If the person had waited to figure out, how do I get all the skills and then apply? I mean, it just never would have moved forward. They would have taken themselves out of the ring. So I think that I will close out there, but those are my thoughts around how to, yes, John, go for it.
Yeah, Meredith, I think you're 100% spot on here. And I think I'm looking at some of the questions and points that are being raised in the chat here. And so there are 2 important ways to think about this topic in this question. One is how you feel and what you understand and know and have inventoried about the skills that you have. So that's one perspective. The other important perspective is what is the hiring manager, that prospective employer, what do they want and what are they looking for? So a lot of times, you might hear back, oh, you didn't have all, I didn't feel like you had all the skills. That could be either you not knowing and understanding what skills you have, or you not communicating them, or maybe they're looking for something that just didn't show up in the conversation or on your resume. And I think it's important to distinguish what the differences are from that perspective. I have one example. I think I was the director of procurement systems at the time, and one of the vice presidents here came forward and asked me if I would do a new role, a job that I hadn't done before, which was the head of procurement. And I thought to myself, I don't have the background to do this, and without even thinking about what is required and what might they be looking for. In retrospect now, I had self-doubt, I had fears that I hadn't processed and I hadn't thought about myself in terms of confidence. And once I sort of verbalized and vocalized that to him and to myself, he was confident in me, more confident than I was in my own self. And he understood and had seen my work and my progress through the career that I had. And he understood that I had the leadership skills, I had the experience in various different roles and so forth. And I think it's just important to recognize we hold ourselves back in some situations. And in other situations, because we haven't done that assessment, we can't really put down what transferable skills, what skills that might be required or necessary for a job. We fail to put those down on the resume or say them in the conversation or in the interview. And I would just encourage people, Meredith is really making an important point here. That is your skills assessment. I think Nicolas made the same point. Your skills assessment is really an important step here for you to step back and think about all those skills that you do have. And then what are the skills that that hiring manager might be looking for? It's not a problem to ask that question. What kind of skills do you feel like are important, the most important? Is it leadership skills? Is it management skills? Is it listening skills? Is it communication skills? You can ask those questions in a resume. You can ask those questions of some managers who are not the hiring manager. For this job, what do you think the most important skills are? So I would just give you those tools and those ways of thinking about things so that you can, number one, get out of your own way. Number two, highlight the most important points about what you do have and what you already have. And then also think about what you might need to be working on, right? That next step is, okay, I don't have these skills. How do I get those skills? Where might I get some experience that will give me those skills? So great points, Meredith and Nicolas. And I think Tisheena also said something about lifelong learning. We'll come back to that later. I think these are the kinds of things that you gotta embrace. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Meredith and John. Those were great insights, and we are starting to see that theme of the lifelong learning and growth mindset that's actually coming up again. But thank you so much. That's really insightful, and I do agree with Meredith. I think that most of us or all of us at some point felt this not belonging and this questioning of ourselves. That's great advice. Next, sometimes the issue can also be that people feel like they are too specialized and get stuck, or that they have been, like I saw in the chat, in the same position or category for a long time, and it's hard to transition and transfer the skills and experience they have. How can people overcome the feeling that their skills are too specialized?
And Rita, I believe that was that for me. I think you said.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to answer. So, and I want to take this even a little further and say I look at this from two different lenses. The first lens is that if you are extremely specialized in a certain field, research, sponsored awards, finance, whatever it may be, number one, I think you have some leverage in that field. So you could use it to your advantage. I believe that if you are so specialized in a certain area, there shouldn't be a lot of you out there, and that you can use that for your next opportunity in that same field. Now, what I think this question is actually leaning a little bit more towards is, I'm so specialized in a certain area that I can't get out of this area. And the way that I would break that down is, number one, are you really breaking down all of your transferable skills? Are you really breaking down your soft skills, your hard skills? Are you stepping back and looking at your job description and really identifying all the things that you're doing? Are you doing these activities that we're talking about today? And know that your career is a marathon and not a sprint. And I think we just said that a second ago. And that there are ways to build your experience beyond your job description. Somebody had just mentioned in here, I think they said, I don't have Epic, but I need Epic. Now, if you're working in an industry that possibly other people are using Epic, possibly asking to take on a temporary assignment or to get trained in that software, or showing the initiative to go out there and say, I'm going to go and acquire these skills. Will you see a result right away? Absolutely not. But you'll feel comfortable enough on your next job application that you'll be able to list Epic or a different software there as a skill.
Thank you so much. That's a great point, and that's a good way to start unstucking ourselves. Thank you so much, Nick. Tisheena, in your leadership capacity, how have you seen new or different transferable skills evolve in response to the pandemic? In your perspective, what skills are needed for the hybrid return to work environment that we may actually stay in?
Adaptability. We have to be able to pivot at a moment's notice.
That's true. That's true.
And just kind of creating new pathways of thinking for dual thinking when it comes to planning. I think also thinking outside of the box is key. Whatever worked prior to this remote environment or hybrid work arrangement may not necessarily work now. And so trying to think creatively. So critical thinking, thinking creatively, effective communication, right? It was mentioned several times also. I think making your communications intentional, meaningful, and clear. Again, being respectful of time. We are all kind of trying to manage this new world that we're operating, working in. And so understanding there are different time commitments because of the changes in the schedules, I think, or the on-campus presence versus working from home, and understanding and being cognizant of that. There's also effective planning, which kind of ties back into thinking creatively when it comes to planning. If you're not able to meet a deadline, I always try to make sure I'm communicating that to the individual, again, because it's impacting them. Managing expectations, right? So expectations, we have to kind of be more flexible. It's not always an easy road to travel, but I think we can get there if we communicate it, clear intentions. And then with regard to people skills, we have to collaborate on different platform now. And so just being mindful of that. Sometimes, is it really worth a Zoom conversation? Sometimes it's not. Maybe it's just, scheduling a day when we're all in person to kind of recapture that presence. And then patience, right? Just being understanding. It's okay. And just having patience and taking the time to breathe and just reflect and remaining in the moment. Just try to remind myself that. So as I say this, it's a reminder to me. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much. Those are great points. And I just could see different areas and skills where you are suggesting and advising us to work and just highlighting those skills like interpersonal skills. And I love that you wrapped it all up with patience, because that's self-kindness and patience to wrap it all up, that all the energy it takes for us to adjust. That is true. Thank you so much for your input. And then John, earlier you mentioned how we can develop our skills in a continuum, which ties very well with our final question related to having a growth mindset. Could you share with us how we can take on a mindset of being a lifelong learner?
Sure. So I think about things, from the perspective of how do you work on building the best version of you? For me, it is, like Tisheena said, being kind to yourself, being patient with yourself, being honest with yourself and with other people. These seem like straightforward and obvious things, but there are things that you do really have to work on, because a lot of times you can be critical of yourself and you can, not necessarily, be as brutally honest with yourself as you need to be able to get past something. I'm going to sort of bring it back to some of these transferable skills for a second here. there's a concept called the say-do ratio, right? The say-do ratio is you want to have as high of a ratio of what you say and what you do as possible, right? That builds trust, right? When you say something, you're going to do something, and you actually do it over and over and over again. People get to know you well, and they get to know you as someone who delivers on what you say you're going to deliver on, right? The best version of you, and I'll keep coming back to this, includes not only being kind to yourself, but doing what you say you're going to do, right? And so if you deliver all the time, anybody who you work for is going to need you and want you on their team. Another important thing here is in this continuum of lifelong learning is this idea that, you know, every move that you make shouldn't be and will not be a promotion, right? And if you want to get Epic as an example, we talked about, I think Nick talked about this a minute ago. If you want to get Epic experience or skills, you may need to take a temporary assignment. You may need to take a lateral move and do something for a little while where you can get those skills. If you need skills managing other people, you maybe need to take an assignment that is a project where you actually manage other people on the project, just to get some, you know, early career experience managing other people, right? So this concept of say-do ratio, being kind to yourself, of being honest with yourself, and of being flexible in the assignments that you take. These things happen over the course of a career. You know, it's not something that happens just one time at a point in time. It's not something that happens in just one job. It happens over many jobs and over a career. And I think this concept of being a lifelong learner, and I like that term, but you know, developing your own self, the best self that you can imagine you can be, developing your own self over time is how I think about this concept of lifelong learning. It's not just learning, it's developing yourself, right? Because some of the skills that we've talked about are not something that you can go to a class and learn. They're things that, you know, maybe you learn from your family, maybe you learn from your kids, maybe you learn from your friends. Those are all part and parcel of how you get to that place of being honest with yourself, of being comfortable in your own skin and confident in the person that you are and what you can do, and honest with yourself, right? So it sounds cliche and easy when you say, you know, I'm a lifelong learner, but it's really sort of, I'm on a path of developing the best me that I could ever be. And I'll tell you why that's important. Whether you get that next job or that next promotion, if you do that, you're going to feel really good when you put your head on the pillow at night, right? Because you're going to be the best person you can be to all the people in your life and in all the roles that you play in your world, not just at work. So it's very fulfilling. It's very, it has a high return on investment personally and at work. And it's something that will serve you well, you know, so I'll stop there.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate your insight, and you brought to a completely different side of what I was thinking about. And I love how you tie to our personal experiences as well, and so well with this transferable soft skills too. That is great advice to all of us, and the best version of ourselves definitely brings more meaning to the effort we are putting into what we think as our career version of us, right? But the personal side comes along. Thank you so much for all your input. And now I saw we already have great questions from all the participants, so I'll pass it on to Brittany so we can
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Rita. I appreciate it. And I also wanted to note that in addition to the wonderful resources that have been coming through in the chat, there's a few more that I think Lauren's going to share. There's one in particular that really relates on to what John was just sharing. So I'm going to post it now about the different resources that we have as staff here at Yale. There's a really phenomenal network of professional development, management, communications, all kinds of courses that you can take that are free. I'm personally benefiting and taking quite a few of them. So I can speak from experience that these are really phenomenal resources and would encourage you to check that out if you haven't. And I'm also a big fan of the mailing lists, Fly, or perhaps however you found out about this one. You can update your email subscriptions and you can find all kinds of customized resources and information. So in case you didn't know, you can tweak your subscriptions. I just want to make sure to plug those before we jump in. Meredith, I saw that there was a question that I think was coming your way that came through our Q&A, and then also you had offered to respond to the many questions that were coming through regarding the need to have certain skills in order to get to move forward in the application process. Would you mind sharing some more about how people can overcome or adapt to those circumstances?
Yeah, and I may actually ask Nicolas to share a little bit too, just from the HR perspective. I mean, from the side of a person who's coaching individuals, there were some really good questions of like, if I don't actually have certain skills, the applicant tracking system. So many of you, depending on whether you're applying here at Yale or even outside of Yale, your resume is quite often, if it's a medium to large size organization, it's probably being initially read by an applicant tracking system, which is an AI algorithm that's scanning your document for certain skills, maybe education levels, and it really depends on how they've set that system up. So, I mean, you're certainly correct. There may be some things and certain technical capabilities that it's scanning for. And if it doesn't see those things, it may not actually move you forward. So I'm kind of curious and I think, Nicolas, I think you spoke to this already about how you might be able to get some of that. I can speak to the side of like, how do we make sure that you're injecting into the resume the skills that might map to the position description? But I am curious, Nicolas, from your perspective, I don't know how much you can share about on the back end of how HR is doing this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's completely transparent. I think we could share everything. Is that the AI piece is so limited to the point where I will just say that every candidate that I qualify and send to a hiring manager, I actually open them myself and review them. And that goes for every other recruiter as well. So believe it or not, the AI aspect is very little, to the point where all it will do is help us take the information off of your resume and help us just view it quicker. That's really it though. So, but we do have to open everybody manually, qualify, not qualify, then et cetera. So in regards to the acquiring the experience that in the hard requirements, so is it true that, say, if you need a software, say you need Adobe Photoshop and you don't have Adobe Photoshop, can you get that position at that exact time? No, that's a hard skill that you do need to have. Now, if that's your dream job and you really want to get there, John mentioned you may have to take a lateral move and go sideways to gather experience in that field, not forever, just to go to a position that may offer it and then progress forward. But you also have to be, very realistic with yourself as to, are these skills that could be acquired in a lateral move, maybe a step down temporarily. For example, I couldn't, go and, be a lawyer tomorrow, and I couldn't probably, one lateral move wouldn't get me there. But I do feel very confident based off what I've seen as a recruiter from our internal and opportunities that like we have here. There's 700 openings every day right now, a little over 10,000 people work here. So do that math. But so there's plenty of opportunity for you to go out there, take that lateral, to get the experience, or then of course asking for it. But not every department you'll be doing Photoshop, you'll be using Epic, so you would have in that case you would have to take a lateral move to get that experience. But everybody is reviewed manually. So
Nick, John, if you wanted to jump in, go for it.
Yeah, I think Nick is making reiterating a really important point about lateral moves. There's also the concept of the developmental assignment, right? And so I think it's important for all of us to take responsibility for our own careers and our own development, our own best self, right? This idea that you might say in the performance management process to your boss, I would love it if you could find me a developmental assignment where I can shadow someone who knows and is expert in Adobe Photoshop, right? That's one of my objectives. I want to be able to say I have technical skills in Epic. I want to find someone who I can sit next to for 6 months or for 3 months or for 2 weeks, whatever it might be. And I want to be able to have exposure and experience with the Epic system. Or I want to be able to go to training in Epic, right? It's a 5-day training or a 3-day training. Can you help me with that, right? So I think you take responsibility for understanding what skills you feel like you need to get to that next job. And then you take responsibility for starting the conversation and assuming that there are people that you work for that are willing to help, right? And if you find a dead end on any one of those, go around the dead end and keep going, right? This is you and your career that we're talking about here. So it's not something that you should stop short of until you've exhausted all the opportunities and options you might have. So I just wanted to tack that on to what Nick already shared and give you another way to think about getting the skills that you need if you don't have those skills. And the applicant tracking system is blocking people without those skills. Go get the skills, figure out how you get them.
Yeah. Thank you, John. That's a really wonderful way of also taking charge of your own career goals, your career destiny, navigating the circumstances and situations and asking for what you'd like and chasing after it. So thank you for that. I also saw that there was a note that came through, and Nick, it looks like we got them connected with the chat. Anything else that you wanted to add regarding the different HR recruiters that Yale has for departments? Any notes or asterisks to add to your link that you've shared there in the chat?
Yeah, I will add this, is that if you're struggling to find a way to gather that experience, or if you've asked and it's been rejected, which you always have to ask before you assume, but reaching out to a recruiter, what benefit will it do for you? It will provide a benefit, absolutely. I think what it will do is, first off, it will show you, okay, these are the opportunities that you're qualified for right now today. And these are the ones, if you want to experience in this type of field or that type of field, that you should probably be looking at. And we have very, very, we call them career counseling conversations, where we would speak with you about your current skills and what you need for this position or that position, and how you could get, for example, if you're level 22 and you wanted to be at a position that's a level 24, it's your dream job, you might have to become a level 23 first, or you might have to take a lap. We would talk to you about that, just so you have at least a plan about which way to go. So I see some attendees on this call today. I've had that conversation with them, and I've actually seen them progress, which has been great. So.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it. And we had a question come through that because of the phenomenal information that you all are sharing out, if it'd be possible for being able to get emails if you are open to questions, if you all wouldn't mind posting that either in the chat if you're interested. That way folks who are attending this can reach out with follow-up questions. We still have more questions to get to, but just wanted to make sure to give a nod to that request. You all are putting out such wonderful information. They want to follow up. Another question that's come through, and I'm going to jump back to one that was posted a little earlier in the conversation through the Q&A side of things, is Meredith, you had replied to this in the Q&A forum, but wanted to allow opportunity for us to discuss it more broadly. Going back to resume writing in that conversation, how would someone be best to phrase those softer skills and highlight an outcome, especially one that's quantified? Any best practices that you want to elevate from the response you gave in the Q&A?
Yeah, so can everyone see the Q&A questions? I'm not sure that they can, maybe they can, you don't know. So there was a question in the chat, but also in the Q&A that said, I'm highlighting the fact that conveying these people engagement skills, social skills, making others comfortable, empathetically connecting. How do you phrase this on a resume in a way that highlights an outcome? And especially one that's quite quantifiable, which Brittany just said. I agree that I think it takes some nuance to figure out how to actually do this. I pulled up, there was a student I had been working with who I think all of his experiences have really been about people engaged experiences. And so I pulled up his resume because I remembered he had done such a nice job of figuring out, I wouldn't say that he's quantifying a lot of this. I mean, there are some things we could quantify by saying that you engaged, I don't know, some way of smoothing a working situation so that you ultimately saved 10 hours of time per week. I mean, there's a way that you might be able to make a process work better that then saves time that you could quantify. So that is some way we could do this, but I'm not sure everything needs to be quantified. So I put a bunch of examples from this student's resume that I thought he really took, he was also worked at an ice cream shop one summer, but he's like, I was engaging with people all the time. He said, I made families feel very welcome. I did certain things that and then they came back. And these were some things that were really important. So I'm going to cut and paste from the answers that I put in the Q&A into the chat. And they're just some examples. You may have to play around with it a little bit, but using terms like empathetically engaged or, listened with great interest to XYZ person resulting in this sort of thing, I think is something you can put on a resume. I'm curious what others would say on the call, like how, or have you seen examples of this done on a resume that you think has been done well?
Yeah, I can speak to a couple of examples. The concept of sharing what you're proficient in is a good way to highlight soft skills. So you could say I'm proficient in active listening to ensure that all team members' important perspectives are presented on the table and used to develop an outcome. So proficient in sort of ways to say, what your soft skills are that then you use to create an outcome, not necessarily quantifiable, but an outcome that's an important outcome for the job that you're interested in. So that's one thing. I think just thinking about phrasing, and this is where the communication skills come in. Becoming a student of, what are some of the best ways to say things is a communication skill, right? And so keep your eyes and ears open for, what are the best ways to present the bits that are the most important bits to what we're talking about here, right? You start collecting them, and then before you know it, you have enough that you'll have a tool belt full of it.
Thank you for that add-on, John. Appreciate it. And that transitions into another question that came through about what Yale resources perhaps have you or your teams found really helpful with building those transferable skills, with building those, whether it's communications or soft skills or documenting it. And this is open to John, if you want to reply, or anyone else on the panel, if there's resources you all have taken advantage of.
Sure. One of the things as a leader that we do routinely is we in our staff meetings and our regular meetings, we make sure that me as the leader, I try not to do as much of the talking. I try to make sure that the people who are around the table have an opportunity to share what's been working for them, what outcomes are they working on, what projects are they finishing up. And the exercise of having the opportunity to talk to another group of your colleagues about what you're doing, what results you're getting, and so forth, that exercise helps you hone your skills, right? And so we all think about ourselves in the context of the people to the left and to the right of us and in front of us. And as you do that work, as you share what's going on in your world and your work world and so forth, not only do you get more comfortable in your own skin, but you're calibrating how you present and how you talk and what you say, how long what you present is being presented, the clarity with which it's being presented, the words and terms you use. You're calibrating those things with the others who are talking before and after you, right? So by definition, you're learning from that kind of an environment. If you find yourself in a situation when you're in a staff meeting or any kind of meeting, pay attention to what other people are saying and how they're saying it and the terms they're using, and then use those bits of learning to calibrate how you then communicate. For you to be confident and comfortable, you have to do it a few times, and then find yourself some of those really low risk situations where you can actually have those experiences happen and get that calibration opportunity. It's just a small example, but it's the kind of example where soft skills don't have to come from a class. They don't have to, transferable skills, they don't have to come from a class necessarily. They can come from your day-to-day work experience.
Yeah, I could add to that too as well. If you are looking to improve your skills or increase your skills, you can certainly join any one of the affinity groups that are offered here at Yale. Through the affinity groups like this, like FLY, you could have the opportunity to work on many different committees. Each group has, communications, they have social media, they have event planning, they have mentorship committee like this one. There are many, many opportunities within the affinity groups for you to expand on your skills, your hard skills and soft skills that you may not have in your current role, that you could put on your resume as well.
By the way, just to add something, I think I saw someplace in the chat that someone was mentioning the possibility that volunteering on a committee wouldn't count towards work experience. That didn't strike as how I understood things. I think of experience as experience, but I may be incorrect. If others on the panel could speak to that.
Yeah, I could answer that. And I think what they may have meant was, say if you were a volunteer for 4, and I'm going to give you an example, it's probably a little bit extreme. If you are a volunteer for 4 years, does that count as 4 years of experience? For soft skills, yes, absolutely it would for soft skills, but for actual years of work experience, it would not be counted because it would have to be paid work experience for it to be counted. Now, did you acquire all those skills on the slide that we mentioned? Yeah, absolutely. But do you have, for example, one that I see a lot is bookkeeping at a church. Is that, part-time, 5 hours a week? Are they going to count that? They would not count that. Hiring managers would not count that. But the soft skills, but obviously, if you're using QuickBooks software, now you obviously are proficient in QuickBooks, but they wouldn't count it towards your overall years of experience.
That's really helpful. Thank you for that, Nick. I think that is true. That's one thing that I think is a major shift when I'm working primarily with undergraduate students. I mean, most of the time they're like, I don't have any work experience. So I don't know that they're looking at that piece in the same way. So that's helpful to know. So it sounds like the skills development can be there in terms of any sort of volunteer, but that it just wouldn't count towards work experience, like time work experience, but the skill sets would still be picked up.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a better way of putting it. Yeah. So if you have 2 years of paid work experience and 6 years of volunteer, you really have the 2 years, but you have those skills, but 2 years of it.
Right. Yeah. Got it.
If I would jump in and just say that is exactly how you get the transferable skills that you need, though, right? You need those transferable skills so that when the opportunity comes up for a work experience, a work role or responsibility, you have the transferable skills that you need to actually step into that role, right? So one leads to the other in a lot of cases.
I have a quick question, follow-up question. So, for example, Nick, if someone reinforces that with a referral letter from a manager at the volunteer experience, would that reinforce the skills acquired, even though it still wouldn't count towards time? Would it reinforce the performance and skills that people acquired in that experience?
I'm sorry, can you just repeat and clarify I think you're asking if you volunteered, did you say managing for volunteer?
No. What I was saying is, so that was really helpful to know that it wouldn't count towards time, but it would still count as skills development in the volunteering experience the person is referring when applying to a job. Mm-hmm. And what I was saying is, if the person also submits a referral or provides the name of the manager at the volunteer experience as a reference, would that reinforce that the skills were acquired and the performance was good and all of that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because the question that was asked to me before about your narrative too, when talking about one powerful message, and the way to put it in there, I think, is to say, my references will tell you that I'm very proficient in XYZ. And I do think that would actually help reinforce and show, yes, I was volunteer, but I put their whole, company on a new accounting software, or their, whatever it may be, but that will definitely help drive it home. Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Thank you all, appreciate it. There's a question that came through about when searching for a recruiter for ITS came up with no results, even if searching for the cost center hierarchy. Nick, any insights, or perhaps that's a follow-up conversation to have offline?
Yeah, and I'll just send the ITS recruiters, Diane Fusco, I'll send it to the chat right now. I'm not sure why it's not coming up, but it is her.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nick. Excellent. Look at that, real-time results. Wonderful. All right. And I also saw a note that came through that went to everyone asking about a transcript, because there's been a lot of really great resources that are pulling up in the chat. Not everyone's able to copy and paste them. And if you're looking for a transcript of the chat, Lauren offered for you to email her, and she's happy to email those over. So that way you all can get the full links and resources and not have to be worrying about pulling this up on the YouTube that'll get shared out later, and then making sure you've got all the backslashes in the right places with those some of those more complicated links that we've got to share. One last question that came through, and please feel free if you're still on the chat and want to ask questions of your own for the participants. But a question that I have is for our panelists is, if you could only pick one transferable skill, thinking about one of those skills from that slide that we were looking at earlier, what would you choose? What would you want your transferable skill superpower to be? What would you prioritize?
I'll take that one quickly.
Yeah,
I
Tisheena.
think just active listening, right? Paying attention to cadence and tone, and to also what's not being said.
Active listening, it's a fantastic one.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that one. I have a hard time with, my kids will sometimes ask me, what's your favorite dessert or what's your favorite color and stuff like. I don't have a favorite color. This one I'm going to punt on. I'm going to say, there isn't just one. This is a pastiche. This is a collection of things that makes you who you are, right? And so I know this isn't answering the question correctly, but there really isn't a superpower. You have to be a good listener. You have to be a good communicator. You have to be a good good manager. You have to be patient. You have to be kind to yourself. You have to have a thirst for more knowledge, understanding. There's a bunch of things that make that person someone who you as a hiring manager want to hire. So if everybody on this call would think of themselves as the hiring manager for a minute, and imagine you got 20 people to choose from that you get to hire, you get to pick from to hire. Well, which one are you going to pick, and how are you going to figure that out, right? You're going to figure it out by looking at the person who's best suited for the job, has the most skills, works with other people really well, listens really well, has a high say-do ratio, is going to actually deliver when they say they're going to deliver something, right? There's a lot of things that go into this, and so I have a hard time just picking one. I guess I guess maybe I could say say-do ratio because that's a big one, but. And one more thing, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who pulled this together. You guys have done an outstanding job organizing this event and pulling this together. It's just been a pleasure working with you. There was a question in the chat about follow-ups. I'm happy to follow up, but I think I would like to do it through Brittany, Karen, and Rita. Anybody in your organization. So if anybody on the call is interested in a follow-up question, if you could send it through them, they can collect them up, and then I can work on getting it back out and answer it that way.
Absolutely.
Thank you for all you. It's been great.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. And thank you all for participating, providing such wonderful thoughts and considerations. There was one last question that did sneak through in terms of asking about converting a CV into a resume. And so maybe that one goes over to Nick or to Meredith for just like a last little note that if we can get that answered. Suggestions on a CV to a resume conversion.
Yeah, I would say I've actually never been asked that before, but I've dissected and really edited hundreds of resumes. And my guidance would be, I'd be happy to share with anybody a resume template that I share, literally the same template with everybody. I just think it's proven to be successful and hiring is clear, as to the point. And I think literally converting your experience from the CV format to the resume format, literally copying and pasting, and CVs are very long. It's really going to be taking that information down. There isn't an exact science, I guess. I mean, I would also recommend to looking at other websites online. Maybe there is something out there I'm unaware of, but I'd be happy to provide a template to at least get you started.
Yeah, I think that Nick, I think you're right in terms of some of it is just actually starting with your 3, 4, 5-page CV and getting a 1-page or 2-page resume template and kind of starting to move. I know the question came from Jennifer, and Jennifer, I put 3 links into the chat below your question in terms of how you convert a CV to a resume. So it's something that we cover quite a lot in our office because we work with graduate students, PhD students who sometimes come to the point of saying, actually, I don't think I want to be an academic for the rest of my life. Maybe I would like to shift to industry. And so I do think it's true that it is a bit of a craft of moving from CV to resume. But the thing that I would highlight is that CVs, generally speaking, don't tend to have bullet points with action verbs and skill sets. They tend to be listings of all the academic things that people have done. Some of them are a little bit more of a hybrid. So you see a little bit of, a whole section on honors and awards and presentations and publications. And it's not that those things can't exist on a resume, but they don't tend to take up so much real estate because they're not really evaluated in the same ways as the skill sets are. So I think the primary shift that we see is a shift away from just a listing of all these things without any descriptions, and a decision making around what are the few things I'm going to share, and then how can I actually highlight skills that I gained from these things? Because most of the time you don't see skills listed on a CV. In like, if you look at an academic at Yale, generally you will not see any bullets with skill sets and outcomes. The outcome is sort of like the publication that they did, or it's the class they taught. So I think that there is something really to be said, though, to just getting a version. I can actually send a link to, in addition to maybe what Nick has in terms of a template, we have a template on our website too. It tends to be a little bit more focused on an undergraduate student, but honestly, it was modified from something that I think the School of Management uses for their mid-career. So it doesn't have to be specific to this. And I think it's a good strategy. Just like start moving things over, and then you can play with it once you get there.
Thank you for that, Meredith and Nick. And also thank you, John and Tisheena, for being such wonderful panelists, for lending so many resources, so many links. I've learned a lot from the notes that are coming through the chat. It seems like many others on this call and conversation have as well. And so thank you all so much for taking the time. With that, Lauren, would you mind wrapping us up?
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. This has been, I'm just looking at the chat. This has been incredibly helpful for everyone, it seems. It's just so great that we're able to put this event on for people, and anyone who has any questions can reach out to me, lauren.hunt@yale.edu, or any of the co-chairs or any of the co-moderators that have spoken today. Yeah, look out for this event on the Fly YouTube page. It'll probably be up within the coming weeks. And thank you all for coming. And we have another session coming up at the end of May, at the beginning of May, I believe. Talking with your boss about their career goals, your career goals. So yes, keep an eye out for that. And thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.